Welcome to the Threshing Floor Podcast, your premier destination for discussion and commentary on the Redemption trading card game and its community. Kick back and relax as we catch you up on the latest news, tournament results, and deck building strategies to take your game to the next level. Now, here are your hosts, John Hendricks and Ager the Wise.
That's right. That's us.
Yeah.
We're here. We're here. So
we are here for sure.
Yes, I know it's been a little while since we put out an episode, but I am excited for this one because at the top of it, interesting thing might be happening with some potential rule changes. So it's gonna be interesting to talk about that.
We're in an interesting season of Redemption right now.
Very interesting. You never know which way it's going to go. Like, we're at the beginning of the journey, and the journey is going to culminate in Rogers, Arkansas at Nationals. But this entire tournament season is laid out before us.
Yeah. And we've got the promos coming up too. Like, so much.
I guess first thing I want to do is make sure that we shout out our sponsor. This episode, like all of the other ones, are sponsored by Your Turn Games. Your Turn Games currently has created a new corner. We'll say it's a new corner of their website. You see what I did there?
Yeah.
Yes, because they have a new page. If you go under Buy Redemption and look at the very bottom, there is a new page called the Collector's Corner, and this is going to be a page where they're featuring all of their more high-end cards. So this is the national promos that they have, which they don't have them all because they're not necessarily in the market chasing after those, but the ones that they have, acquired, they're listed there. They also have some ultra rare pluses and some other cards that you can get your hands on for, a significant chunk of change for most of these cards. But if you do it now, and you'll have to do it quickly because it ends at 11:59 Eastern time, so we know the exact end time, 11:59 Eastern on the 28th, which is going to be Friday, I believe. So hopefully this episode comes out on Wednesday. That gives you Thursday, Friday. You can get 25% off. So if you're going to go ahead and spend money on one of those high-end cards, why not knock 25% of it off?
That's awesome.
You can't beat that deal.
Can't beat it. Can't beat it with a stick.
We are going through a legal battle now with Your Turn Games for the name Collector's Corner. No, I'm just kidding. But eventually you will hear a segment on the podcast whenever we do that of the Collector's Corner. And that was suggested to us by Brian Jones forever ago. And we decided we were going to do that. And we haven't used it yet. And then lo and behold, here's Your Turn Games. Andy reaches out and is like, hey, just let you know I'm creating this thing on the website. And I was like, oh.
That's hilarious.
So his lawyers are talking to our lawyers. I think we're just going to mutually use the name. I think it'll be all right.
I think so.
But some of those cards are beautiful looking. And I know you, Jake, you don't care what the card looks like. You just want the playability of it. So
I'm just looking to trade the cards I have on this list for lots of other cards.
Yeah. So that is always an option. But if you are looking to acquire them, you can go and check those out there. Always great to start the top of the podcast talking about Your Turn Games.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm excited to talk about these rule changes, so we won't waste any more time. We'll jump right into it.
Let's do it.
Sit back and relax while we get you caught up on all the latest news and notes from around the game and the community.
All right, Jake. So this potential rule change. Now, I was not aware that hints were being dropped in the rulings channel because I don't pay attention to that channel a lot. And that's not to say that I ignore it. I just usually by the time a question's asked, a question's answered before I see it, and then I'll just peruse it every now and then just to make sure something crazy didn't happen. But I missed this, and Tim mentioned it to me, where apparently Redemption Aggie has been dropping hints of potential forthcoming rule changes.
Yeah.
It also goes along with Chad, who we're hoping to have featured in the deck of the week. So maybe a little, foreshadowing there. But he released his article on Numerous Nativity, I believe it is the name of the deck. But he had played it, or no, it was the the one with Nicanor in it, maybe.
Is it's?
And
I know he has
said,
Nicanor in the Starstruck, but is it also in Purple Hearts?
Yeah, but
Maybe
specifically about the Nicanor one.
Oh, the Nicanor combo.
Because there was the ruling.
It was reversed from,
Right, and they had asked him to not share it because they weren't sure how they were going to work around that or whatever, and now he's been given permission to freely share that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe that means that the rule changes are already kind of solidified or in a semi-solid state, and they're just waiting for the timing to put it out.
Mm-hmm.
But some of these other rule changes have far-reaching potential, and I'm a little excited about them. I'm not going to lie, because of the simplicity that I think they're going to create. But for people that are listening and have no idea, and you want to try to break it down into just a straightforward, this is...
Yeah, there's some interesting ones here. So we have the first one here. This is the I don't know what we call this one, the ongoings fall off fast rule, where currently in the game, if you bounce, say, a Herod's Temple, it still remains any effects that the Herod's Temple had that phase are still remain until the end of the phase. So you're protecting your gospel heroes in your territory. If you activated a toss already, the toss is still happening for the rest of the phase. So all those things. But now, when you bounce any of these permanent cards, all the abilities that they had on them will immediately fall off that phase. And I'm not sure if that counts for the toss for Herod's Temple, because that might be different as an activated ability that happened in that phase. But otherwise,
I would think based on kind of the hint that was provided, that if you paid that cost and then I get rid of that fortress, you lost your cost for nothing.
Yeah, they could be for sure. And we'll have to see when the actual full rules come out. But like the concepts that Aggie's been hinting at is that permanent cards like artifacts, forts, placed enhancements that get removed from play without being negated still lose their effect. They're no longer doing what they used to do. So it wouldn't necessarily negate in terms of like undoing anything they did already. Like if, let's say, the toss doesn't work anymore, you wouldn't undo the reserve the top card. Like you said, like the cost of reserving the card would probably still happen. But I'm interested to see, like, it's going to have a lot of implications for gameplay. It's going to make things easier in some senses for sure. But yeah,
it's going to make things easier for newer players.
Exactly.
Established, battle-hardened, competitive-driven.
Scarred.
Like those players that have been around the block. Mm-hmm. They might have scrolled around the block a time or two. Those players, I feel like this is something that is counter to the way that Redemption has operated for so long that there's probably going to be a transition. There's going to be people on both sides of the aisle on this one. I think people that enjoy the simplicity of it. And then I think there's going to be people that maybe it's taken away a little bit of like how Redemption plays, some of the quirkiness. Now, let's be honest. If you open it back, peel back a little bit, some of that quirkiness is part of the reason that some players come into the game and then they leave, because it just, even though we as Redemption players understand it, it makes it harder for the onboarding process of a new player.
Yeah.
So this is something that I know I didn't struggle with it. Okay. As much as when I was a newer player, I understood it. I just hated it so much that I could get rid of your fortress. I could come into battle, get rid of your fortress, but you would still have the ongoing ability of that fortress. So, for example, you could push your rescue. I could block, get rid of your fortress, and then target someone that's in your territory, but they could still be protected by the fortress that I got rid of. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense that the card is not on the board state anymore. It's not involved in here. I don't see it, but it still has an effect. And I think I understood it, but it kind of irked me a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a thing that every new player or newer player goes through. And I think the simplicity of getting rid of that will be a benefit in the long run.
I agree.
It's something that I've even advocated for in the past, that once that fortress is gone, make it go away. But there are going to be cards that inherently get stronger because of this, and ones that get weaker because of this.
Yeah.
So are there any cards on your radar that you're like already chomping at the bit? You're like, this card is about to go crazy.
We already have an amazing card that gets even more amazing with this Lost Child Found bouncing 3 cards. Like, it used to be like, okay, I'm gonna bounce this, bounce that, but they still have I can bounce your hand protection fortresses, but you still have hand protection in this phase, so I gotta do something else. But now you can bounce those and immediately use a dominant to get to their hand or something else. Like, that's crazy. So that's really interesting there. There's lots of like, we also talk about the cards that really get hit by this, and that's like those CBN cards that restricted something or negated something. So, man, there's confusion of mind. You got the cross overtaken, all these things. So
Peter's Curse that
Peter's
came out
Curse.
big towards the end of mid to end of last season.
Yeah. So, yeah, Lost Child Found. The curses, both Goliath's Curse and the Pharaoh's Curse, Joshua's Sword, Thaddeus, a lot of those cards that can remove stuff from territory get a lot stronger when the effect ends immediately too. So those are definitely some really good points to think about.
Another thing I'll just say it, I don't know how much it moves the needle for those particular themes, but there's cards that haven't even been, let's just say, playable for a while that I don't know how much they jump in playability, but now they at least get a buff into they can affect the game. Because, it's like when we look at a card and we start thinking about, is this a fast card? Is it a slow card? Does it replace itself? What's the cost of putting this card in versus something else? A card has to do a certain amount before it really benefits you. And a card that doesn't do anything right now in the moment, but because, from LOC, for example, I think I think it was LOC. It might even be from POC, but there's a Babylonian card that gets rid of, if it's this type of card, you get rid of it. If it do this, if it's that type of card, like Babylonian Siege Army or something like that.
I think so. I think I remember that.
I think there's a way to get rid of a fortress with that. If it's a fortress, take it or something along those lines. And that doesn't matter if I take it and you still have the ability through this battle. So that card and cards like it, and I'm just using it for an example, haven't increased their ability to help you get the block because they're doing something that doesn't even affect this turn because that fortress is allowed to play out and keep having its ongoing ability. And now a card that, it's not a great card, but it comes out and, I can take a fortress. Well, now it's directly impacted this moment and not future moments. It just makes sense to me. And knowing that cards will have that impact, maybe some of those cards that we look at or have looked at in the past and was like, nah, this isn't good. Maybe they have a little bit more utility.
It changes the math. Babylonian Siege Army is not a good example because it does negate the card first. It says negate or good or neutral card. If it's an artifact, take it. If it's a human, capture it. If it's enhanced, discard it. If it's a side or fortress, reserve it. So, not a good example on that one. But other cards like that.
Poor example by me, but the point remains, I think. Like a card that just comes in and gets rid of it without negating it. So
exactly.
I want to say there was something from LOC that did that, maybe with Assyrians or something. But
yeah, it could be. Like some guy that takes a fortress, was it the Rob Shocker or something like that? But yeah,
I don't know.
Saris.
Now we're at the part of the podcast already. It usually takes us a little longer to get to it to where now we don't have any idea what we're talking about. So I went down a rabbit trail in the example, but the point I think remains that some of those cards get a bump in potential playability and utility that wouldn't even get considered before.
I just want to add, there's that, and there's also another hint that Aggie dropped this week about another change coming in too, about how negates will actually repulse their interrupt. So this one is a lesser known part of understanding the game. When a negate comes down, it immediately interrupts, but then it just leaves a prevent effect where it is. And in battles, that doesn't usually matter. But for these ongoing cards that last, it can matter because something like Satan's Seat, it comes down, it interrupts, and then it leaves a prevent. So what theoretically could happen is currently in the game before this rules change is going to come in, and it's not coming in yet, but like if I play Teaching in Parables and negate my own Satan's Seat for the turn, I can then play a Protect Fortress, and because it's not prevented by Satan's Seat, it actually activates. And then when Satan's Seat turns back on, it's just turning back on the prevent, it's not turning on the interrupt. So I can actually sneak my card in underneath the prevent with just a one phase negate or a turn negate on Satan's Seat. Now the new rule is going to be like, as far as I can tell, if a card comes back online with a negate, it repulses the interrupt. So after that,
it then blanket hits everything again.
Again, yeah. So you're not going to sneak anything in underneath it and then keep it around.
That's another one. I was having trouble when I read that.
Mm-hmm.
I was having trouble understanding what he was trying to say because I already understood how, like Babbel's one of those that, okay, a lot of people don't understand how Babbel works.
Exactly.
And then I knew how it worked. Maybe I learned the hard way, but I knew how it worked. Yeah. So when he was explaining this, I was trying to figure out like what the difference was, but I guess now they're going to make it operate the way everybody kind of naturally assumes, which is another thing with these potential rule changes.
Players,
and I know that I know rules are changing a lot throughout this game, but that's with every card game. There's rule changes all the time. You're not going to get any game that sits down and never touches the rules as new cards are coming in. Like, you just have to, in order to maintain a healthy game, there's going to be rule changes. But the rule changes, especially like both of these that we're talking about, I don't want to even compare them to previous ones, but both of these are done with simplicity in mind and intuitiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And the only one thing that I wish we could wrap into that is someone asked, or I think it was actually you. I think you tagged them and asked if we could have identifiers copied when you copy an ability. And Aggie was like, well, if you do that, you'll also copy the Unity requirement. So, I'm okay with that trade-off.
Let's do that.
Because if I can use Necromancer and it worked the way that I think it would by its own ability, saying it can copy any ability, I'm okay with that, even if I can't use, imitate to do, like, what is it, Lawless? Or is Lawless the one with the Unity? Or no, Undesirables. It'll copy that, and you don't have to have Unity if you're copying an Undesirables or whatever currently. So you can copy someone else's Undesirables even though you don't have Unity for it. I'm okay with that trade-off. 100%. That makes sense. And that wrap that into this, and let's just do it all. The game should play in the most intuitive way possible. And I think these rule changes are pushing us towards that. So
Agreed.
I know that there's going to be a transition period, and it may end up affecting a little bit of the tournament season because players are going to be adapting and adjusting to this and not being able to play as quickly and familiar just in those certain lines of play because, now that Fortress is gone, now I have to adjust because I don't have the checkmate that I thought I had on this rescue or, on this block. But I think long-term it's going to be good. I would say I am in favor of the rule changes. What say you?
I think I'm in favor of these rule changes, and I'll need to see the exact rules too, because like sometimes you might find
that's important.
This
there is speculation among us, so it is like speculation at this point on our part.
The best laid plans sometimes have a new this creates a new loophole that we never even considered, like type thing. So, but currently I'm
the next Jaden deck
exactly. Jaden wins on turn 1 now. Thanks, guys. But yeah, I'm optimistic for these. I'm excited for them. There's gonna be a lot of rule changes. We talked about some in the last podcast too. Like there's gonna be lots of things happening. So we got the wild stuff changing. We got a few things changing. So it's gonna be really interesting.
Yeah, it's gonna be a pretty comprehensive update to the rules whenever the next one goes live. I don't think it's going to be to where you can just look at one or two things. I think there's going to be, at least a handful of things you need to look at to make sure that you're as caught up. So once you go to college and once you get that degree and then you go to get your master's or whatever, you're always working. So you got to keep that PhD for Redemption fresh. So as soon as you think you know it all, you don't know anything.
Exactly.
So as long as you understand that and we keep growing and adapting, as long as the game's growing and adapting, we're good. That brings us to the next thing here on the outline. And this is something I'm super excited about. I don't know how excited you are about it, but I'm super excited. Last year we brought the power rankings, and that kind of highlights the competitive side of the game pretty well because, you get to see where you rank in the power rankings on the competitive scale for Redemption. And I think that's cool. And we're going to bring that back whenever we start getting some concrete data consistently on tournaments. Because, if we did it right now, it would be kind of like, what would we go all the way back to TJC to grab some results and use those to rank? There's just not enough data right now. But once we get into the heart of tournament season, and I don't know when exactly the first ones will come out, but we'll get that going again, and it'll be fun for everyone involved as it carries us through nationals again. But there's something else we want to do, and I reached out to Andy and I floated this idea to him, and he jumped on board with it. Andy's like me. Again, like we might be bad for each other a little bit because we're always wanting to give away stuff. And that's the one thing that I hope people take away from the podcast from, even its inception is periodically, like, we're just trying to give stuff away because we like to give back to the community and finding any cool way we can to do that. Well, we're coming up with something new to give away. So we're going to give away some booster packs each month as we pick a Redemption Player of the Month. So these Player of the Month selections are...
And it's going to be Baboony Tim, Baboony Tim, Baboony Tim, Baboony Tim.
No.
And Jaden.
Well, it could work out that way, potentially. Well, let's go ahead and just... What are we awarding it for? If we have the power rankings, what is Player of the Month? Is it just whoever's number one in the power rankings? It could be.
Ooh.
It could be, but it could also not be. It could be someone not even on the power rankings.
Oh.
Because what we want to do is, yes, playing this game and playing the actual game and being competitive with it is part of it. And that will bear in with Player of the Month. But also what we're looking for is to have an opportunity to reward someone that has made an impact within the community. And that people don't just make an impact by playing the game. They also make an impact by giving back to the community. Maybe they wrote a article and it had some really good information. You mentioned making the joke that Tim would just win a bunch. Okay. Would you say that anyone deserved it over him when there wasn't a lot of things going on and he did the gauntlet?
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, Jaden's sharing his gameplay from the Lackey Grand Prix, and that's awesome, and he's showing new decks and things, but I think for the amount of time investment in things, something like the gauntlet, and I'm not, that's just an example, but someone writing an article, someone helping the community out by doing,
Lackey Help Desk.
Yeah, or helping get the new file in for Lackey for an update.
Answering lots of questions on rolling questions.
Yep.
Bringing up good topics and general conversations on Discord.
And so competitive success can be part of this, but it's not what we're looking for as the sole contributing factor. So then that brings us to who is eligible to win. I would say that I'm never going to win this thing. I'm not. I will remove myself from the hat, but anyone else in the community, I think, what's wrong with, hey, these rules updates come out. Maybe we feel that they are such an improvement over what they're trying to correct, and the work that the elders put into it. Marcus being one of the main ones in that. Maybe Marcus is Player of the Month. Who knows?
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to discredit someone if they're even an elder. Because it's more to be Elder of the Month. I'm not trying to say that like we're going to intentionally try to give it to them just to include them or anything. I'm just basically saying anyone is eligible.
Mr. Miyota.
Now, can a player win it multiple times? Yes. But with a caveat, and haven't even told you this, Jake, but I think that there is you help me decide right now, is it a 1 month or a 2 month cool off period?
I'd say 3 month cool off period.
3 month.
Like, I think winning 3 times in a year, that's enough to be player of the year, player of the month 3 times in a year.
Yeah. You know? Okay.
We want to spread the love. Obviously,
but we don't want it to just be a participation award, though.
No, but
we want it to help.
I think you'll always find people who are actually doing stuff. Like, if you even rotate it between 4 people that are doing the most in Redemption, you're sure you find 4 good people that are always investing in the game. Yeah. So, I would say let's spread it out enough to where we're not giving them all to Babooni.
Okay. So Jake has spoken. It is going to be a 3 month cool off period. So if you win in March, which is when we'll announce the first one, sometime in March, then you can't win it for April, May, or June. So July would be your next option to win it. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, just to highlight people that are making an impact within the community, whether that's through competitive success or some other way that they're helping edify or build up the community that this game has. And I think it's important to kind of reward people for that. And we're going to be giving away some booster packs to whoever wins each month. And so what that'll be is 2 booster packs at random. To make it easier on Andy, he wanted to keep it random so that people weren't, hey, I want this pack and that pack. For him to think about it, it's just he's grabbing 2 packs, putting it in a mailer and sending it off. So you get 2 random packs. So we don't have to do anything except for reach out and confirm an address. So we'll do that upon, announcing the winners. We'll reach out. So Player of the Month is coming. So that's going to be awesome. A new thing. And we're hoping to, as soon as we can, and we have some data, bring back the power ranking. So we'll have the competitive side taken care of. And, we're not giving away booster packs for that, but whatever.
You get bragging rights.
You're getting the vanity of your bragging rights if you're on top.
You get to write a giant post in the sports Discord about your...
Yes, about winning the fantasy. Yes. I think Charles was brilliant.
That was funny.
That was it's also, I think it was more brilliant because it came out of nowhere. Like, who's thinking about fantasy football right now? And he drops this. And not only did he drop it in the fantasy football server, he dropped it in the regular server too.
Oh, that's funny.
So I read it once and then I saw it again. But that's something new for the podcast. Player of the Month, again, in collaboration with Your Turn Games. This podcast is all about some cool news. It's all about collaboration and it's all about new things. So there's even more. So we've got power rankings to rank the players. We got Player of the Month. How good are these players? They're only as good as the decks that they're building and they're playing, right?
Well, that's true.
That is true. So I'm going to give the floor to you to share, because this is kind of your brainchild project here. So tell us about the next new thing.
Yeah. So we came up with this. Well, I came up with this idea, and a lot of people helped me build it for the monthly meta forecast. And at least I'm going to try to do monthly. We'll see how it goes in terms of monthly. But the plan is that we have some players who are going to be helping me select 12 different decks to put up for vote. And we're going to go in collaboration with Zerubbabel's Temple Discord. We're going to be having all the players on that Discord voting. And that Discord is, for those who don't know, is just our competitive-minded Redemption Discord, where all the talk there is about being competitive. It's not about, oh, I like playing this card because it's fun casually. No, this is all about, how do you get a strong deck? How do you build a strong deck? And these are the people we want to ask, what type of deck do you want to take to a tournament? And we're going to be ranking these decks.
That being said, about the Discord, everyone is welcome to join that Discord.
Welcome there, yeah.
So if you're not invited and you want to know how to get invited, then just reach out to us. We can get you in the Discord, but by proxy, getting the right people involved. But when you talk about it being competitive, I just want to make sure it's not like an exclusive club. Anyone is welcome. The only thing that is required is that when you go there and you're getting this free information is as you are willing or as you are able, you are adding to the conversation, potentially sharing a deck list or just offering some thoughts, being an active member of that so that it stays a vibrant group of minds trying to
Voting
find the best
survey.
competitive decks.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd love to have more people vote in this survey, but we're currently in the middle of voting right now. We have about 24 hours left on voting, and we're going to see how the community ranks these 12 decks. And the scores are between 10 through 5, and 10 is the top deck, and hopefully there's not many 5s on that list, but just goes in that power ranking thing, and there's lots of details about how you can do it on the Z Temple Discord, but I'm excited about it, and I just really wanted to find a way. One thing that's cool about it is that we're going to keep on tracking it. It's not anonymous, so we'll keep on tracking it throughout the year, and we'll be able to notice trends like, okay, this player was really high on Joshua back in March, but down in April, there was a new card released, and everybody's like really down on Joshua. Joshua scores plummeted. Like, we're going to see interesting trends and how things move, so it'll be fun to see how everybody perceives the top decks in the meta.
I want to be clear to people listening that while you're hearing the podcast and we're talking about this, the voting is already closed for this first rendition of this.
No, I'm keeping it open until
next
tomorrow.
Monday.
No, this Monday. Oh, okay. Sorry, with this podcast.
This podcast coming out Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm a fool. So
I wish I was that good at editing. I could get it out that quick, but okay. Well, I'm aware that it's going to be over with, so that's going to give us a chance to. I'm going to ask you about predictions of where you think certain decks might do it. But I want to ask you about when you say voting and things like that. We're not intending to take these 12 decks and say Joshua is the best one, so we're going to put it at 1. We're going to put this deck at 2, and trying to rank the 12 decks, versus the other 11. What we're trying to do. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're trying to take this deck. So let's just say Jay's Blue Moabites list. We want to know how strong that is as a meta deck versus the other expected threats in the meta that are our decks that it would face. Where do we think it stacks up? And then we give it a power level based on, really it's, 1 through 10 or whatever, 0, technically, I guess 0 through 10. But we're saying since we're taking the 12 top ones, we've got a group of people, brilliant minds, to help us select the 12. That baseline is like 5.
Actually, I locked it in. I found a way to lock it in, so it has to be 5 at minimum.
Okay. So anything below that would be, challenger, contender, starter deck level, not a meta relevant deck. Not to knock the products at Your Turn Games, so Andy, sorry. But anything should be at least a 5 or higher. So what you do is you'll select 10 as what you think is the absolute strongest deck.
And you can do multiple 10s if you like. I think these decks are neck and neck. They're both the best. That's fine.
And then, or if they're really close, you could do one as a 9.9 and then one as a 10. If you think it's really that close and one just gets some kind of edge. But you can do 1 decimal place, so 5.1, 6.4, 8.3, so forth, so on, whatever. So what we're doing is we're assigning what we think their power level is within the current meta game, how we see that deck performing. And then we'll take that information and based on the average power rating that each deck gets, it'll then sort them into, well, this deck is top because people rated it. Overall, it's got like a 9.4 as the, its power level, and it's the top deck. So it received enough 10s to push its average up to 9.4. Instead of, I think this deck is 1, 2, 3. So I think the rating of the deck, we're more looking for this deck and where we think the power level is against the meta. And then a secondary step would be to sort them by that rated power level versus, I think this one's better than that deck. because I feel like you can get a lot more information. And like you're talking about tracking it across several months, you can see, oh, well, this person thinks this deck is boom. And then as a community as a whole, we think it's up and it levels off and then it sharply drops because it stopped doing well in tournaments because people figured out how to play against it or something like that. You know, like Honeypot last year would have been immediately towards the top. Yeah. And then it would have been steady for a little bit and then it would have plummeted.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I think it's important to understand how to vote. Now, another thing about voting is it's okay to not rank it or rate a deck if you don't know about the deck or you have no feelings about it. So you want to explain like why you would rather them not vote if they don't have a lot of understanding of that deck or its potential in the meta?
I just did my voting today and I left a few decks off. I'm like, I don't really have a strong feeling about this deck. I know some of the cards in their deck, but like I really haven't run into it and I don't have a strong feeling about it. So I'm just gonna let it. I don't need to add to my point of view because I don't have a solid point of view. So if that's where you are, feel free to not put a point down. One thing I do ask is that you put 110 on there just so we have one ranking of 10. If you're gonna do the ranking at all, put one deck at 10. But yeah, feel free to leave a 1 blank if you're like I don't know this deck at all. I've never run into this deck. I've got no clue how strong it is. There are links in the Z Temple to all these decks for examples if you'd like to look them up, but you don't have to. I'm not trying to make this huge like homework for everybody. Like if you just want to drop in you want to spend a minute doing the survey and you want to put in this, okay, I know 70 of these decks, so I'm going to rank these 7 decks. I'm going to leave those 5 blank. That's totally fine. We want to get your input. We want to get your information. Also, by not voting, it is a type of voting in sense of saying like, this deck is still not on everybody's radar, right? Like if you see a deck that has, if there was like 20 responses to this survey, but this deck only got 10 responses, you know that half of the people that responded don't really have a strong clue about what this deck can do. And that actually speaks to the meta itself too, because that means this deck is a little bit off of everybody's radar.
And then we can also use that, not saying that it's to the benefit of the podcast, but maybe that helps us pick which deck to spotlight on Deck of the Week in the future. 100%. Because, hey, this is a deck that a lot of the people on this group committee group picking these deck lists, they think it has viable, potential within the meta, but the community as a whole doesn't have a lot of information on it. They're not as familiar with it. So now we can spotlight it and potentially, hey, shed some light on it. I think that's another cool element of it. Okay, so by the time this podcast comes out, the voting will be over and we will have the numbers.
Yeah.
But as a prediction, obviously you've already voted. I haven't voted yet on anything, but where do you think we're going to end up? What do you think what do you think the top 3 decks are going to be?
Top 3 decks. Well, I did already look at some of the results, but like even going into this, I was thinking that Joshua Thieves. Exactly. Take Joshua Thieves could be number 1. And I think it will be. It's got a lot of hype going on around it right now. Not saying this is necessarily definitely the best deck, but I think perception-wise, it might be the best deck right now, and at least I think a lot of people will agree on that. So Joshua, I think Nativity Herds is still going to do well. It's still strong. It was good from last Nationals. And then I'm not sure on the 3rd. There's lots of good ones. There's a lot of things fighting for that spot, but it's probably something Clay, because Clay is just that good. So probably Clay Herds or something like that. So that's what I'd say.
You want to take a stab at what the bottom 3 are? It's probably some that you left blank because
one of the ones I left blank. Yeah. So far, Meek White is having some of the lower responses. But yeah, like everything else is a bit in the middle. So Green Soul Hide is getting some of the other lower responses. But yeah, those are the ones that are people are not as hot on right now. But that could change. Like we still have some time voting left. We haven't got a ton of votes in yet. And hopefully I hope that once people hear this podcast, they're more interested in voting for it next time in March as we do this forecast again. I know this one came really late at the end of February, so hopefully in March we'll have the voting out and we'll be able to have a new And we'll see some trends too. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I am interested before we move on and talk about some tournaments that are coming up, but one thing I am interested to see is when you separate the deck, and obviously there's information you can go and find out whose deck each of these are. I mean, for several of these, they've been posted already and made available either on Land of Redemption or through the Discord, various Discord servers. Or maybe you've ran into it in a Lucky Grand Prix and you know somebody's hit you with like a buzzsaw with it. But when you separate the deck from the pilot, because right now we're just trying to analyze the strength of the deck through this, and it's not necessarily, well, this deck, but with this person piloting it, you separate it a little bit. I'm interested to see something like Soul Surfer that I don't think is all that great in other people's hands. Versus Chad's got this crazy track record with it, and I've played it. I've even talked to Chad about playing it, and I've done well with it. Like, I think I placed, I want to say, I don't know. It's been a while since I was playing it heavily, but I didn't have the same kind of success that Chad was having. And Chad has, through different, rule changes or new cards coming into the card pool, has kept it as a viable deck. And it'll be interesting to see how people think about the deck, but as its own thing versus when it's in Chad's hands. And then, some of the other decks, like a standard, clay build when it's not piloted by Josh Potratz.
Yeah.
When it's not piloted by a Marshall, that type of thing. So it'll be interesting to see where people think the deck itself ends up and being able to track that trend. And then obviously certain players are going to pick up any deck they pick up. You can bump it up a notch or two just based on the quality of the players themselves that are playing it.
And like you're saying, we're not speaking to the players playing the deck. We're talking at the actual deck strength. So obviously Jaden can do well with anything, but we're talking about the decks, not Jaden specifically. So power rankings is where we talk about the players. Yeah.
So that's going to move us right into talking about some tournaments that are coming up. And obviously at the heart of tournament season is always the road to nationals as we work and progress ourselves through this tournament season. The last couple of years we've done a podcast episode to where we kind of look at the tournament season as a whole, and kind of the roadmap to nationals, if you will. But I will say that there's not as much information about the big tournaments yet. I feel like, and it might just be because it feels a little different because the last couple of years we've had Mr. Classic kick things off right at the beginning of March. And since we don't have that, we're waiting on kind of towards the end of March and beginning of April for big tournaments to happen. And so it's like there's a lot of lull period here at the beginning versus what we've had the last couple of years. But we are working our way towards nationals, and it's going to be in Rogers, Arkansas, at Rogers Christian Church. Rogers Christian Church. Let me say that.
Rogers,
make sure I didn't. Rogers Christian Church.
Rogers, Arkansas.
Yes. July 31st through August 2nd. And at the time of release for this podcast, if I get it out on Wednesday, 156 away.
156 days.
156. I know that sounds like a lot. And trust me, it is a lot.
It is.
It is.
And some instances it's not.
Well, it's definitely a long time away as far as the actual tournament and all of that. But if financially you have to start saving up, you have to start, putting a little bit back to work on being able to afford to go and things like that. It's always good to be aware of where we are in the time frame. But we're super excited about nationals being there. It's about 12 hours away from me, so it's not super short, but it's also, I mean, it's not Michigan. So,
exactly.
Well, Michigan, when you go through Kentucky to get Brian and then go up, and I think that was 2 8-hour trips or a little over put together. So it was a decent little trek. But anyway, looking forward to that. And there is lodging at the church. So that is available if you want to take advantage of that to save on some of the cost. But There's other details, and they're constantly providing other information. So if you go and look at the forums, I know it's a crazy prehistoric thing, but if you go to the forums, you can find this under the Redemption official tournaments, and it has all of the information there for hotels, for the closest airport, for close by places of worship other than the church if you want to stay in town for that Sunday service or whatever. All kinds of information. Tells you how close the nearest places to get food and things like that. So lots of information. They're doing a really good job of putting that and compiling that and having it ready for us at an early point in the season. So take advantage of that and work and make your plans to be there for Nationals.
It's going to be awesome.
The 31st Nationals, celebrating the 30th season. I had to get it in. The next thing we want to talk about is the first state tournament. And I was under the impression that Mr. Brian Jones, Booster Jones himself, was going to be hosting the first state tournament. But no. Our boy Chad was not going to be outdone. He snuck his in there a little bit earlier. So we've got
Oregon State.
The Oregon State tournament coming up.
Nice.
And that's going to be the first state tournament this season. And, well, you want to go over and provide some of the details here?
Yeah, it's going to be March 28th and 29th at Skyline Baptist Church in North Bend, Oregon. Lodging available at the church, but there are no showers, so you have to figure out how to get
Bring your deodorant.
Closest airport is Eugene, Oregon.
That's full body deodorant, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Just Axe everywhere. Booster is $18. Sealed is $6, and all other events are free. Let's go.
Yep. So that is going to be a fun tournament by all accounts. And they've had some people travel up for some of their tournaments in the past or whatnot. I think last year they were able to have both Babooni Tim and Mr. Tyler Stevens, Mr. Hiatus himself, travel up there. So they are definitely open for outside visitors if you want to make the trek there, depending on where you are. So that's why we want to provide you with as much information as we can in sort of kind of still a short snippet. But if you want more information, it's going to be hosted by Chad France. You can reach out to him, see the tree on Discord, and he can provide you with any other information. Otherwise, a lot of this information is posted in a longer post on the Discord in the tournaments section. So that's going to bring us to
Kentucky State.
Yeah.
Kentucky State for Mr. Booster Jones. Now, this is a tournament that the last 2 years has been the biggest tournament outside of Nationals, averaging nearly 35 players.
Insane.
And I don't know if it's gonna be that this year. We certainly hope so. But this one's going to be April 4th and 5th. And the lodging and food, at least breakfast and lunch on Saturday, is going to be available. So eat on your way in. They'll be selling some drinks and snacks to get you over that night. And then they'll put you in a bed with bedding available. A lot of these details
they'll put you in a bed? They'll carry you to your bed and just drop you right there.
Look at me. I don't think Brian Jones is carrying me. I'm just saying.
They'll give you a night story, and
they will provide a bed for you. Let me get my words correct. But a lot of this information, and if you'll notice, we didn't start off by talking about on this week's Redemption with Jaden. We didn't have that. But on this week's Redemption with Jaden, if you go back to his video from Thursday, it is him and Mr. Booster Jones talking about the Kentucky State tournament. And then a big part of it is going to be the side event. But we'll get to that in a moment. But the information about the tournament and all of that, you can go and, hear a little bit more in-depth detail about it on that video with Jaden. But lodging, food provided. Andy from Your Turn Games, Andy, sponsor. He will be there on site, set up as a vendor, so he'll have cards. Obviously, if you want to purchase any singles and things of that nature, I assume he's going to travel with most things. But again, if he's traveling, there's a chance he's not going to bring everything. So if you want to make sure that he has something that you're going to need if you're going to be there, you can reach out, and I'm sure you can work the details out with him. He'll go ahead and bring the cards for you. You can go ahead and purchase or whatever, and just as the delivery option, just pick up at the state tournament there in Kentucky. But there is going to be a $10 door fee. I know Chad's not charging, but Brian is, but that's because of the accommodations and things or whatnot. $10 helps cover all that stuff. Booster is $24. Sealed is $8, and then all of the other categories are free.
Free.
Then the other thing is that the side event, Mr. Classic! I had to do it. Mr. Classic side event, okay? So Mr. Classic is going to be happening as an event at the Kentucky State Tournament. They weren't able to have it be its own event this year, and they had to work out having Brian be available to participate because he is the reigning Mr. Classic. And I say reigning because, well, I don't want to say that he has carried this better than Jaden had or did the year before, but when you see him at tournaments, he's wearing the belt. He's got the belt. I'm kind of a little disappointed that Jaden had to ask him on his video to go and get the belt, or if he had it nearby, because he wasn't already wearing it. But he has kind of he's taken it to another level with promoting the belt. But there is a change to Mr. Classic this year. This year, it is not going to be invite only, you know.
Ooh.
So, you know, as bad as I did last year, I didn't think they were going to let me play in it ever again, but turns out they will let me play in it because they'll let anybody play in it. So it's open to all players. So anybody that wants to participate is available to sit down, and anyone in the community could be the new Mr. Classic.
No way.
So this is going to be pretty exciting to see. Now they changed the format. So the first year it was scrolls only. And then it was scrolls plus roots. Well, now, based on a suggestion that Jeremy got from somebody, I don't know where it came from, but it's scrolls plus roots, plus let the winner from last year pick a rotation set to include.
What?
And when you say pick a rotation set, there's low hanging fruit to be had, with Second Coming being a part of Cloud of Witness.
Yeah.
I mean,
wow.
It's hard to go away from Cloud. Plus, it has a lot of things that blend well with the classic game, the scrolls, because it was a set that came out when those cards were still a big part of the competitive game.
Interesting. Cloud.
I kind of felt like he would go here, but it also gives you the potential later on if someone chooses a different set, or, you know, if they win, whoever wins next year, if they're not able to choose Cloud, they have to choose a different one to keep it fresh. Part of what Brian and Jaden talked about on that was Cloud lets it play more like Classic, and some of those newer sets would potentially just have it be kind of, it would. So I don't know how good of a long-term thing this is, but it's going to be interesting for this year. Now that tournament is going to start at the beginning of the event. So the beginning of the event, they'll start the Mr. Classic side event. So players can get in there, get registered, start playing, and as they're eliminated, it's single elimination. They'll be able to participate in the categories that are being played on Friday night, which I believe is sealed in teams. So you can participate. If you don't think you're going to do well, you can still participate and see. And then if you get eliminated in the first couple of rounds, you still have the opportunity to play one of the other categories for that evening. So by all accounts, with the Oregon State tournament coming up at the end of March, and then that first week of, April having the Kentucky State tournament, I was talking about the power rankings earlier. We're definitely going to have enough data at that point to have some power rankings. And
it's going to be awesome.
I don't know. Gut reaction, our gut answer here. Who do you think wins Mr. Classic this year?
Ooh. Honestly, with single elimination, it could literally be anybody. Single elim? That's crazy. Even good players can have oh man. It could be anybody. It could be anybody. Who would win? If you force me to pick a name, I think Jaden's going to be playing, right? Like, I think he might.
There's going to be a J involved with the winner.
So somebody start with the letter J is going to be winning Mr. Classic. So.
I can tell you 4 people, and it will be one of the 4.
Okay.
I feel like I can confidently say it's one of the 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's Brian Jones.
Okay.
There's Jeremy Chambers. There's an Alstead, but it's not Jaden.
Ooh.
It's Justin Alstead. And then 4th, okay, fine.
Yeah.
It's the other Alstead. It's Jaden.
Oh,
I think one of those 4 are primed to win it.
Okay.
I mean, that is dependent on Justin coming down and being involved. I don't know if he's planning. I haven't heard anything about that, but if he's there, I think him, Jaden, Brian, and Jeremy are the 4 dark horses for that.
Dark horses.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I think so. And if you had me cut it in half, I might drop the Fortress.
Okay. And what if I cut it in half again?
I would love to see it come down to Jaden and Brian again. Just because those are the 2 that have had the belt the first 2 years of it. But it would also be kind of cool to see somebody new get it as well. So I don't know. And maybe if you're feeling disrespected, we didn't even say your name there. Maybe you show up and you show out and you prove us all wrong.
Exactly.
So
and then you get mentioned on the Player of the Month too for winning the whole
Player of the Month, Mr. Classic winner. Yeah. It could be.
What if you got Player of the Month, Power Rankings #1?
Your deck won the.
Exactly.
You played so good in Mr. Classic that your deck got votes to be in the top 12 meta decks, even though it's a classic deck.
Exactly.
Oh man. Okay, I'm off the rails now, so we'll move it right along.
Now, it's your chance to join the podcast and have your voice heard as we get ready to answer your questions with this week's Community Mailbag.
All right, it is the Community Mailbag where you guys get to be heard on the podcast. So we've got a couple of questions here, and feels like we're getting a lot of repeat questions from certain people, certain elders, maybe trying to get some information, trying to use us to their benefit. But Tyler Stevens posted this question, and this can be a simple question, or depending on how much time you got, this could be a loaded question.
Yeah, this could be a whole episode.
The question is, what does a healthy meta look like? And I can definitely tell you what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like Love at First Sight. It doesn't look like the Widow combo. It doesn't look like things like that. You know, back in the day, potentially the Children of Light combo deck. It doesn't look like things like that. So what does it look like? I'll open it up to you first, Jake. What do you think a healthy meta looks like?
I think a healthy meta has an aspect of rock, paper, scissors. And I think this is one of the things that any game designer is looking to have some semblance of in their game. Not that it literally needs to be the same as rock, paper, scissors, but you want a deck to have a weakness and also have a strength, and people to be able to exploit the weakness, but the strength to also be valuable in an area too. So, hey, I brought a deck that's a rock, and then you brought the deck that's scissors. I'm going to smash. I'm going to have a higher win rate against you. Maybe an extra 5%, 10% chance to beat you normally. Like 60% win rate, 60-40 is a really good win rate for a deck. 65-35, that gets crazy. So you want to have some sort of strength over another deck, but you also need to have weaknesses that are clear and people can target. And yeah, I think that's one of the big basics for a healthy meta game, is that even if there is a best deck, it has a weakness that is noticeable and attackable, and you don't feel like, oh, this is the best deck and there's nothing to do about it. It's Superman. It doesn't have a kryptonite.
One of the things that I've picked up on you since you've been on the podcast and hearing you talk about deck building a little bit more is you're all about the variance and the output of a deck from the best it can be to the worst it can be, and trying to find, I guess, the middle ground of it might not be the absolute best, but it limits the bad matchup potential. And I think having a meta to where you can analyze it that way versus, okay, I'm just going to approach, I'm going to build this deck that's super oppressive and it just doesn't lose to anything unless I misplay. And I think with all the recent rule changes from the last few years, all of the shift in the design philosophy, I think a lot of that is kind of bearing its fruit with the metagame now, to where I talk about it all the time, like the average deck. So somebody that's been playing, let's just say a year versus, a battle hardened veteran. So imagine Jaden playing someone that's been playing for a year. Well, 4-5 years ago, that's a RLK situation, like kids getting ran over. And now the quality of each deck has improved to the point, and also we've limited some of the crazy stuff that you can do to where it's pushed things closer to a middle ground. And I think we're at a point to where Jaden, obviously, most of the time should win that matchup, but the quality of the deck on the other side is much improved. And I think that's part of a healthy meta too, is there is a little bit of variance with the deck building and the intricate choices and nuances of knowing how to build for the expected meta game that you're going to face. But the average deck being at a certain power level, like minimum threshold, I think is also, it's not as fun to, to hear someone say that they won, 3 games by 5-0, 5-1, 5-0 in the first 3 rounds at nationals. But now when it's like, oh, well, I won 5-4, I won, 5-3, it was a 4-3 timeout win. Yeah. I feel like there's not as much negative play or negative potential from the person on the other side now, to where they just feel like they didn't even have a chance. I believe that the quality of each deck being improved, and I think a lot of that goes back to the rules. How do you think the recent rule changes over I know you've only been back a couple years now, but even in that time, there's been a few rule changes, and it seems like each one of those is pushing towards a more healthy game state. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely fought for a TC change. My thought was different than what they came up with, but I still love the 1 TC change. I think it's really good for the game, because unlimited TCs in the first turn was just insane, just crazy. Just watching people cycle between Emmaus Road to Emmaus Road to Emmaus Road, a bunch of other cards in between. Like, okay, let's get the game on. Like, the game Redemption's about the battles, so over souls. It's not about the territory class, civilization simulator or whatever type thing. So Farmville, like, oh, I'm building my heroes up here at my farm,
and you're just sitting there watching the days pass by.
Yeah, I called it solitaire, but yeah. So I've enjoyed that. Almost all. I think all the rule changes so far I've been really happy with. And there's more to come. So, but I've just been really excited about how they've changed the game, made it more interactive, for sure.
Yeah, I also, I guess, kind of in the same vein of the last spiel that I had here, is being able to watch Keegan play, and I know that, I don't know, what was it, like 3-4 years ago? It was right before rotation. I built him a deck that I thought would be a good deck for him to try to be competitive. And it was like one of his best blocks was going Nebuchadnezzar, the TXP one, to Banquet to do like the chump block or whatever. And it was like a hard after God offense, so that it was like go and get your battle winner and play. And I was trying to find a way to make the complex game simplified enough to where he could do these more streamlined, like, this is the line of play. Yeah. And yeah, they can be interrupted with, messed with, or they could not work in a given situation, but just trying to find something that he could confidently do. And now I don't have to worry about that, because with rotation, with card abilities getting more simplified, with streamlined wording, like cards are being worded the same, I think the conscious effort from the entire card creation team, but also just with the rules. Obviously, that's the same elder body or whatever group of people working, but it's like they're working hand in hand so well now that each change is made to push towards this healthy game state to where now Keegan has a deck built mainly out of GOC. You know, shoot me, you know, like it's the strongest set. So he wants to have the strongest deck that he can and pilot, but it's also a simplified game because he doesn't have to worry about someone having that big opening turn and him having to keep up with a million things happening. Definitely. Even if they get, you know, they draw 8 extra cards and they set up a couple of counters on the board, it's not as overbearing to where he can still kind of fill out that game state. And I think if we're going to put on the box, whatever it says, I have a sealed booster pack here, actually. Let me see if it says. It does not say. I was looking for the age thing, but I feel like it's advertised as ages 8 and up. I believe that's what it is. I think having a healthy meta game, obviously there's going to be older players that are more like, one of my first experience, or actually my first card game tournament experience was I had a Yu-Gi-Oh deck and it had a like starter deck, Blue Eyes in it. And I was like, I was feeling pretty good as a kid. I was like, I don't know, like 10, 11. And I went to this card store and this guy had a deck with 3. He had the thing that turned them into Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon with where they fused together, polymerization or whatever. And this, I liken it to a card shark situation. Like there's no way that kid, or me being that kid, sits down and is expected to really compete with that person. The diversity of it is so great. And there is still going to be some diversity, but I believe our game has done a lot towards closing that gap to where if we're advertising that it's a potential kids game, kids ages and up, they can build a deck and show up at a tournament and not feel like, yes, they're going to lose more games than they win. That's just the nature of it. I mean, it's ages 8 and up. It doesn't say you're going to win at ages 8 and up. So I'm not trying to say that. So don't let my words get twisted here, but that kid should be able to show up and not feel like he's in a card shark situation. And if you think about that RLK that shows up and faces a Tyler Stevens, you know, who answered this or asked this question, you know, let's just say 8 years ago, that's a negative play experience. That kid that shows up 8 years ago and plays against John Early, negative play experience. And I'm not saying that losing is never a great experience, but now even if they lose, it feels more competitive because the average of potential of that deck has gotten so good. There's so many more deck lists being shared and shared in such a way that all you have to do is click, boom, it's imported into potentially Lackey. You get a screenshot of all the cards so you can go and physically build it based on that screenshot. And I think that we are pushing towards a healthy meta. Is it perfect? I don't want to say nothing is ever perfect, and everyone has.
You're approaching the question from the community side of it, and I'm approaching the question from the game design side of it. And they both tie into that, and that's a really good point. Like when the community strengthens up, it helps the meta game in a lot of ways. But also the card design is important for the meta too, obviously, because I think I saw them say like we knew that Joshua was going to be a strong theme coming out of the set. They gave Joshua like some amazing cards. They reprinted Captain to ensure that's going to be the next rotation when that happens, if that happens. So like they gave Joshua the tools to be used so it would become a theme that was worth playing. And then we look back at II and we see a lot of IR. We see a lot of themes that feel like they're missing tools, so they're not actually part of the meta because like Genesis Egyptians don't have enough, right? Like maybe Queen Tefini's is enough to boost them, even though she's not a Genesis Egyptian. She's a pale green Egyptian, so maybe she could boost them. But yeah, it's interesting to think about it because you looked at the question on the opposite side of the coin, and I looked at the other side of the coin. So just it stood out to me.
Both of those are straight money, though. Straight cash, homie.
Yeah, let's go.
So anyway, That's enough time on that one. Next question here. You wanna go ahead and read that one?
Yeah, let me pull it back up. How do you evaluate how good or useful a card is? For example, when you see a new card, what makes you think this card is great or this card will never see play? That's from Robar. It's a good question.
Yep. He's another one that's asked a few questions now. This feels a lot like a similar question we had last time.
Yes.
From, I believe it was Luke. And speaking of, we'll break down the fourth wall here. We're recording this. This is on Saturday night. And I just saw in the Discord, break down the walls.
Oh, yeah.
I saw he shared that Luke won a tournament. They had a small tournament at Chris Fashman's house, and he ended up winning that tournament in Type 1. So congratulations to him. Maybe part of what we said last time on the podcast, maybe that was the trick for him. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So maybe, Robar, after we answer this question, you're going to go on to win your next tournament. Who knows?
Nationals. He's going to Nationals. He's going to do it.
He's going to Nationals. We should make it a trend to, when they do American Idol and they get that ticket. I'm going to, what is it? Hollywood, I think they say.
I don't watch.
They get the golden ticket or whatever that passes them around.
They go into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Yeah, we should just start. I'm going to Nationals.
I'm going to Nats. He punched his ticket to Nats.
Yeah, he did it. Anyway, so this question I think is another one that comes from a place of confidence in yourself and your own ability to analyze cards. So when I saw 12 Jordan Stones, for example, I know it's become almost a meme joke at this point, right? 12 Jordan Stones, trash card. No one's ever put that in a deck. And for the most part, unless it's like a contender deck or challenger deck from Your Turn Games, shout out them. I don't see it much of a place for it. But that one's easy to tell. So I think two things are at work. I think as players, we need to get to a place to where we feel like our opinion can matter when we read a card. But then strictly confidence aside, so that's something to work towards as well. But if you're just looking at a card and you want to know how to do it, I think it comes down to how do you play the game? How do you build your deck? There's a lot of, if you go in and look at the most top decks right now, look at how many, let's just say, battle enhancements are being played on offense. Mm-hmm. Like when you rescue, a lot of people are leaning into dominant rescues, or they're using, are relying on winning battles without enhancements. However that's done. So if a card comes out and it's this is a crazy good enhancement, but it can only be played in battle, and it can only be played if you have initiative in battle, and okay, well, now I've given it 2 strikes already. The third one is like it's on the fence already.
It better be amazing if it's got the 2 strikes.
Right? Because if it can't interrupt the battle, if it can't be played in SI, if you have to have initiative to play it, if it is not territory class, so it doesn't have utility built into it to where you can only play it in battle, the ability's got to be something like groundbreaking, because the chances of you getting to use that in a game become very slim, because, I'm ready to play this card and win this battle. Boom, they play Glory. You're done for. Or they have battle extension. You play it, boom, they extend the battle, add the battle or whatever. It didn't really get you that soul. That's just an example. And you've talked about this too, like rating and enhancement, whether it's fast, it's slow. Another thing is a card that gets you like card advantage. Is it really an acceleration piece, or is it just a 1-for-1 trade-off? And just analyzing, I think, not to ramble too long before I let you speak on it, but I think also it's an opportunity cost. Every card you put in your deck comes at the cost of another card that could fill that spot. And our goal as deck builders, whether you think you're right, wrong, indifferent, our goal is to build the best possible deck. If we pick up a deck, if somebody puts out a deck list and you pick it up to play it, you are challenged then to be you're a person playing that deck. You have to find the way to take that deck to the best possible deck it can be. So every card slot is under scrutiny. Is this the best card that can be played in this spot? And what am I costing myself by playing this card instead of something else that's in the card pool? And I think very, very much so, I think looking at it from an analytical standpoint is almost a requirement in order to be able to decipher whether this card is good enough to be in the deck or if this card is one that maybe should not be included. So I'll turn it over to you now.
What you said is right, correct. You look at what the cards, if it's slow, you could categorize it. Is this a battle winner? Is this a territory class? You look at the modifiers. Obviously, like, modifiers are very important. CBP makes a card jump up in value. CBI is one of those things that can finish a battle without being interrupted. CBN is obviously the best out of all of those, except in cases where it's getting tossed. So you look at those modifiers, you look at those things. You look at the uniqueness of the card. You look at, hey, like, if I wanted to, like, you look at Matthew, like, this can draw up to 16 cards. Like, you can look, like, if you had 0 cards in your hand and you attacked with the Matthew and you saw the foreign languages or whatever it's called, confused languages card, you could draw 16
we
cards.
We can never call that card out by the right title.
It does. No one plays it. The only time the card gets played is if you're donating it to your opponents to get Queen Tefini's discard 16. The point is, unified language. I don't know, something like that. The point is, look at Matthew, like, this card, this draw is considerable. Like, it is better than any potentially better than any hero's draw. So, like, you just look at what the card does. Like, we have with this, there was a Genesis hero that can draw 1 and banned, or he can draw 3 sometimes. So, like, you look at that and, like, that's
what card is that?
I know, but he has 0 power, so it's garbage hero. I don't know why anybody would design.
I don't know what loser designed that card.
Exactly. No, but the point is,
give me, like, the Days of Noah instead.
So we look at this card. We just evaluate that card. If it draws 1 and bans, like, it's replaced itself in the ban. That's okay. If it draws 3 and bans, that card's pulling a ton of weight. Like, that's amazing. Like, not only does it draw the 3, but it also replaces itself with another character in the ban chain. Like, that's amazing. So
and using that same example, though, another way to analyze is having a 0-10 number means that it's a nimble card, or what is it? Agile card, because if you choose to just push solo, you get guaranteed initiative unless they're interacting with a dom or whatever. So if you know hand knowledge, you can push and get to play your enhancement. So I think that's another thing to, again, use to analyze.
At the same time, though, because the Genesis characters tend to be big, if he's banding, like, the 10 is actually kind of, like, numbers get really huge for Genesis bands real fast. So there's that. But yes, if he's solo, he does have a lot of agility there. That's for sure. But yeah, like, you look at all these things, and one of the things you do is, before you finalize and saying a card is bad, you give yourself room to say, hey, like, is there anything I'm missing? Is there anywhere this could be wrong? Like, when I look at 12 Jordan Stones, like, it looks bad on its front, but, like, is there going to be a hero printed that says may activate 12 Jordan Stones on this character? And those type of things can change a card from being unplayable to playable. And sometimes a card just needs its perfect pair to be the thing that makes it amazing. We look at Ephesian Widow. That card was garbage for a long time, right? Before the
garbage.
Before the combo was found, no one was using that card, right? If I'm correct. But, like, once people figured out, oh, like, this card when paired with this card turns into an infinite draw before the TC rule was implemented, like, then the card's perfect pair was found and it changed it. So just be willing to change, say, like, hey, this card seems bad right now, but if it had this type of card printed, it could change it up. And yeah, that's what I say, is look at what the card can do, see what it can do in regards to other cards. All Gold Brigade negates get measured against Amazing Faith usually for me, because Amazing Faith has proven itself as one of those amazing negates for gold. And if you have just a gold card that says negate a card, draw a card, like
yes,
I could have a CBN negate all evil cards and get a dominant for
ridiculous.
7-0. Like,
but I'm glad you brought that up, though, because that's another thing that I think. And I don't want to classify this and say, like, newer players to the game, but it's definitely newer players to the game. But then I think players that haven't taken that next step just yet. They still think there's a world where you do it too much. And I think a while back I did that like meme of that book, The Art of the Deal, and it was Jay Chambers posted on there, and it was The Art of the Splash or whatever.
Splash, yeah.
So you can't lean too much into like I'm just splashing and nothing. Like you lose some cohesion and some synergy within a theme. But I think you also sell yourself short if you take Genesis, for example, and you have blue, but then a lot of your heroes have potentially green, and you don't look at the green side of things and what enhancements you can bring in or whatever. And then that also works even within its own brigade. So like Ruth stuff, you can play white enhancements. It doesn't have to be Ruth. So if there's one that says if used by a Ruth hero, you can do this, or it has some tie to Ruth. But then there's a better enhancement that came out in GOC that doesn't require a New Testament character or something that you can leverage to use. Use the better enhancement. It doesn't matter if it's outside of the theme when it comes to competitive play. Now, if you're trying to build theme decks or whatever, for casual play, or you just want to, build cards that fit into that Bible story or whatever, you can do that and be perfectly fine. But if you're trying to do a competitive
win
deck,
games,
don't force yourself to, it's not in this theme, so I'm not really thinking about that. No, you definitely need to think about anything that you can force to be in there without, like putting Delivered in when you only have one character that can play it. That might be a little much. We used to talk about Tyler always forcing Delivered. Okay, that might be a little bit much. But if you have four of your 9 heroes have green, and Delivered is really an option, and you have an artifact you could definitely use a second activation to get in one of the early turns of the game, Delivered is a consideration for you. Even though it might not be something that naturally feels like it goes with your deck.
Agreed for sure.
So that is the community mailbag. We only had 2 questions we had for this week.
These good questions though.
If you guys want to be part of the next community mailbag, which we're going to try to do this on each episode or whatever, whenever we do have time to record, go and find the link. If you go in the blogs and podcast channel, you can just scroll up and find where we posted it before. It's the same link, and go and submit your questions. If they don't get used right away, they're still held and we can potentially use them in the future. So go and submit your questions and maybe be part of the next community mailbag.
This week's Deck of the Week is presented by Your Turn Games. Join us as we take a deeper look at a deck that has sparked our interest and spotlight the mind behind it.
All right, we're sitting here with Chad France, friend of the podcast. You're one of the people that's been on quite frequently, but it's been a little while. But how you doing, Chad?
Doing great. Learning about time zones.
Yeah. I guess to break down that fourth wall, I got woken up from my recliner in the living room. My wife was like, hey, you got to go record. And then I wake up to messages. Apparently, you were expecting me an hour earlier. And that's because you thought I was on Eastern time. I'm on Central. So time zones are a little bit tricky. That's one of the things we deal with such a widespread community for our game. But hey, we're here. That's all that matters.
Indeed it is. No doubt.
Now, before we get into talking about your deck, the main reason we got you on the podcast here, your Starstruck, I guess, couple of decks. There's a couple of different variants. You want to take a moment just to talk about your fundraiser you've got going so you can spotlight that?
Yeah, certainly. We've got a play group here on the southern Oregon coast, and we're about as far away from nationals each year in terms of the U.S. as anyone is. And the community has generously, the last couple of years, participated in a drawing fundraiser. And so this year we've got a set of the 2024 National Special Promos. And how it works is I believe it's $20 you donate, you get a ticket in the drawing. And then we'll do a drawing at the end. And so if you donate more, you'll get more tickets. But it's a fun way to try and get some of the kids here. We've got a large play group full of teenagers. And so give them an opportunity to be able to go to nationals when otherwise they wouldn't be able to go. And so it's worked really well the last 2 years, hoping for a similar type of outcome this year. But yeah, that's what that's all about. Thanks for giving the chance for me to explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of cool that you have at least some avenue or opportunity for some of those kids to participate. And one thing I know from my brief time helping out with youth ministry is teenagers, a lot of them have good hearts. They don't usually come with money, though. Usually you have to kind of help offset a lot of things in youth ministry with fundraisers. So it's kind of cool that you've been able to do that the last few years.
You're 100% right about that. Yeah, and particularly if you're in a low-income area, which we are. Like when we try to bring the kids to summer camp, for instance, we have to do fundraisers to get them there, a lot of the kids. So I can't really fundraise for Redemption through the church. We max ourselves out with mission trips and camps, but it's neat that the community is willing to do that for this. So it's great.
Yep, absolutely. So let's get into talking about Starstruck. So first of all, I know that you've put out a few deck lists or whatnot, but I guess let's just take it from the place of maybe somebody's listening that hasn't read about it. And I'll be honest with you, it's been a little while since I read about it, so I might ask you some redundant questions that are answered in some of those articles about the decks, but just kind of an overview of what Starstruck is.
Certainly. So it all started, I would say, last spring 2024. I'm always trying to think of new ideas with deck building, and something caught my attention, which was that, you have all these star abilities that top deck a good dominant from deck, and then the game now has a bunch of ways to get that card to hand. So some of it's lost souls like Prosperity, Grumbled, Shepherds, Lawless, if you top deck Crowd's Choice, that is, can also get it to hand. And then you've got Virgin Birth, Bearing Our Sin, and then I noticed a few others like Sign of Jonah's star ability, and Offering Your Son. And so I was like, man, that's actually kind of powerful if you can use that to get something set up. So the first deck I built was trying to get David in Love at First Sight with Awesome Things and try and get, a really fast start with that. And that deck was okay and fun. But then I was like, man, this shell would actually fit really well with Nativity, because a lot of those star abilities that top deck a good dominant from deck fit well with that. So I was like, why don't I try to go to Crowd's Choice to Mayhem right away on turn one and get a really fast start, draw a bunch of cards and then get into the typical Nativity stuff. And that deck I ended up using at Nationals as kind of my main deck. I ran it 6 out of 8 rounds, I think, and it did pretty good. I lost a couple games with it 5-4, and it was good, but the problem with the deck was I was like, it doesn't really do much. It's super fast. Like I would deck out sometimes turn 2, oftentimes turn 1 I get down to less than 15 cards in deck. It was blisteringly fast and consistent, but it just didn't do much to stop the opponent. So after Nationals I was like, man, if I could find a way to do this and then actually mitigate the opponent's strategy a bit. And so what I came up with was using that consistency engine to top deck Crowd's Choice to go to Numerous as the stars. And then I wanted to get something set up like Jonah and Nicanor, and I realized Parmenas would work good too to enable Nicanor, and just have a bunch of Enosh, a bunch of counter characters. And, with that, I realized that, okay, some of these guys have an ability like St. Patrick could top deck a green card. So it's like that fits along with the top deck a good dominant, and so have another way to Numerous. And that was a lot of fun. And then we realized that Nicanor deck protection stops it. I was playing a game against E-Man in a Rob M tourney, and I was like, oh, that's a bummer. So I tried a version of the deck where I was trying to get Women with Child and then Judas and Matthew, and I try and go to, a fast turn 1 Resurrection with the Woman with Child, get out Nazareth and have Judas too. And that was okay, but the problem with that build was you really struggle with Nazareth down when you got a bunch of junk cards in your deck that are just in there for star abilities and stuff. And so that one didn't feel so great. The latest deck I built is, I don't call it a Starstruck deck because it's not all in, but it uses that consistency engine, and it's Purple Disciples. And what I try to do now, the deck's called Purple Heart, is turn 0 I want to get the Resurrection, and then I'll play it on my opponent's turn when they go first and play out John the Fisherman, and the deck's all purple. And it has an actual defense. It's pretty consistent. I'm trying to, of course, do the same thing if I go first, but use Matthew and play Resurrection of Nazareth. And I think that's the best version I've come up with, because it's not a glass cannon. If I go second, I'm not doomed. I have an actual defense in the deck. And it's also really cool, the idea of playing Nazareth out on my opponent's turn when they go first. So that's kind of the whole saga. It's been a process, but I think this latest deck is probably the best one. The second best is probably the Nativity one, honestly, because it's not a glass cannon. That one's an actual balanced deck with a full Herod defense. The numerous decks are really fun, and if you go first and combo, you win. But if you go first and don't combo, you lose. And if you go second, you probably lose. So that's the whole journey, but it's definitely a unique idea. The whole consistency engine there, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So the Nicanor interaction. So you said that Nicanor stops it?
No, so the deck was trying to get Nicanor, Parmenas, Jonah, and Enosh out, and I also have Melchizedek in there to protect Lost Souls from evil cards. So the problem with Nicanor that we found out is that if the opponent has deck protection, Nicanor doesn't work, because he forces each player to draw one from the bottom of their deck, and so that stops his ability completely, which is really annoying. And so this was actually missed at Nationals, because, you know, Jay Chambers and Jeremy Chambers are running a deck with Nicanor, and I'm sure they have plenty of games where someone got deck protection, and it was played that Nicanor still worked even if the opponent had deck protection. Does that make sense? Basically, deck protection stops Nicanor from working.
And I played Jeremy at Nationals, and I had Bethlehem Stable out, so whatever. Yeah. You know, and it was a close game. It might have mattered in that game. I don't know, but kind of cool that discovery happened. And so there was a conversation, apparently you and the elder team you mentioned, where they asked you not to share that yet. What was the reasoning that they gave to you of why that they didn't want you to share that?
So it was twofold, because this was back in August when we figured this out. The first was that they wanted to evaluate it a bit further to make sure they were going to stick with that ruling. And the second was they wanted to release it in a rules document. Well, that rules document still hasn't been released. So Marcus, our beloved Redemption Aggie, he gave me permission to go ahead and spoil it, because it didn't sound like it was going to change. But those were the two reasons, which were understandable.
Speaking of that rules document or whatever, that update that's coming, we've talked about it on the last two podcasts we've done now. This one we've recorded that isn't quite yet released because you and I are still recording for it. And then the last one, you know, with the WoW abilities, however they're going to tweak that, and then potentially this update to permanent effects or whatever ongoing ability. So like if an artifact or a fortress goes away, the ability ceases, kind of like a placed card or a territory class character. So a lot of rule changes potentially that are going to kind of tweak certain interactions and things. So definitely looking forward to that, and thankful for some of that, just for the fact that it's going to make the game a lot simpler. And I guess when you think about this and you explain it, it's kind of, it almost like hits you like a ton of bricks. Like, how did no one think that would be stopped with deck protection? But anyway, so it's kind of cool little backstory. Now, talking about the deck itself and putting especially like the numerous stuff, it sounds a lot like as you're describing that. And I know that you were involved with building that consistent deck that was love at first sight, and finding the way to make that play out. You even built that deck that I forget what you called it, but it was the classic Impartial Judgment deck that you shared that I played last year at Classic Weekend. So there's a lot of like Genesis built, almost like combo-y stuff that you've done in the past, and it feels like this is kind of a little bit in that same vein. So did this come about tweaking with some of those other Genesis explosive turn one plays?
Yeah, it definitely, I like stuff like that. I like combo decks, and so it definitely came about because, you know, I kind of always have combo stuff in the back of my mind. Combo decks are a lot harder now with the rules that we have. 1 territory class enhancement per turn, 4 ability activations, reserve rule. But it definitely is the closest thing we have to some of those builds. And yeah, originally Starstruck didn't start out that way. It was just, okay, I've got this really consistent engine to get any card in the game almost turn 1, you know? And because the first build wasn't a combo deck as much, the Nativity one, it was more just, I'm going to add this engine into an already good deck to make it faster and more consistent. But yeah, the numerous ones are certainly combo decks like that try to get, you know, tons of heroes out, lock down the board, give the opponent no chance of coming back, running a super tiny defense that just tries to block, you know, as much as possible. So yeah, it's very similar to those type of builds and has the strengths and weaknesses of something like the Love at First Sight combo deck. If you go first, combo, you've won the game. If you go second and the opponent gets counters down, you're probably not going to win. And if you go first and don't combo, you're probably not going to win because they run such a small defensive package, you can't really weather the storm. So it's a really, you know, explosive, fun deck to play, but has the drawback that it's fragile.
And you're talking about it's hard to do combo deck things. I don't want to get too philosophical here, but with the change to obviously rules and what you can do being limited in a turn for 4 activations, you also have the 1 territory class card that you can, or territory class enhancement rather. I guess you can play as many characters as you want, but those are a lot harder to generate the kind of effects that territory class enhancements do. Do you think, or how much healthier do you think the meta is if a combo deck is limited in the regard that now you're talking about it's hard to have that kind of deck with a solid defense and you don't have the wild consistency that you used to have. So everything that is combo is really just glass cannon decks that, you know, upon impact can shatter with just one piece of disruption from the opponent or whatever. I feel like even though they're not quite as fun because you don't get to do all the I'm chaining this into that or whatnot, a holistic look at it feels like it's building a little bit more of a healthy competitive balance while still having something. So the big output of a combo deck is you building the deck to get one specific card through the Starstruck package that you've designed here versus, oh, well, this is what my deck does on turn 1 and then I hit you for IJ for 8. You know, it doesn't have the same explosion, but there's a trade-off because it's a healthier, I guess, game state for the game as a whole. Do you think that that's accurate?
I completely agree with that because, yeah, you know, before those rule changes happened, like, let's say the Love at First Sight deck wasn't spoiled to the community ahead of time. That would have won Nationals and it wouldn't have been fun for anyone. Now, it was able to be countered because people had time to prepare, and so it didn't win Nationals. But yeah, I completely think that way. Obviously in Classic, like you found, there's that deck with, you can still do a big IJ combo deck, but even that, the rules limit it. And so I think these rules are good. They keep combo decks from being too powerful and ruining the meta and creating a game state that's just not fun where you can't play the game. And so you can still do combo decks. Like, those combo decks are really good. I had some good results with the Nicanor version, you know, even with the rule realization, I still was able to use it. I put like Shipwreck in and stuff like that to get rid of their deck protection, and I won some games with it, but I don't believe one of those decks can go to Nationals, go across 8 rounds, and do well enough to win the tournament because there is, you know, the fragile nature, the glass cannon nature, like you said, which is good. Combo decks, they should be fun, be able to win games against the best decks in the game, but really what you want is more resilient builds being what rise to the top that are balanced, and that's the type of game you have to play. And that's really where I think the game's at now. You can't, maybe it's possible to win Nationals with a combo deck, but a lot of things would have to fall into place, like going first a lot And, you know, a lot of luck would have to happen. More balanced builds are going to be what win, which is good. That's good for the game.
I think so too. I think there's also still, and maybe you feel a little bit different since you're building more of these push the envelope type combos versus just a certain interaction built within a standard deck. When you build an all-out deck that's focused around one of these combo moves, it feels like there's still enough of, you know, room to play in the sandbox for a combo type player to where you can find some stuff. You can kind of get on the fringe of like maybe a ruling, you know, kind of like when, you know, Snatch Spear, when Jaden first realized, oh, well, maybe you can choose the blocker and then band or whatever. And even though that, you know, we've come to a new ruling, I guess, standard for that. And I don't know, it just feels like there's still enough room for a combo type player to find excitement within the game in the current format without it being overbearing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I completely agree because, yeah, I've had a lot of fun with those two Numerous as the Stars builds, and I still use them. I'm still running them. You know, I probably wouldn't take it to nationals, but I run them in tournaments here and there and have had a lot of fun because that's my preferred play style. You know, that if I could play any type of game, it would be using a combo deck. And if I lose, okay. But when I win, like taking down one of the best decks in the meta with something like that feels really good. And when it goes according to plan. So yeah, I think it is still a viable strategy. You can beat the best decks with combo decks, but it's just, you can't beat them consistently, I guess is what it would be. But yeah, combo players can, and there's not many people that are in combo decks. Jeremy Chambers he's definitely someone who likes to build those two. You know, you look at his Impartial Judgment deck that he's ran, and he even, you know, got second this year. I was reminded of that in one of the big tournaments, the TJC tournament, and so they still do have a place in the meta.
Let's be honest, Jeremy is the like oppressive combo player. Like, he won't say it and he won't act like it while he's playing the deck, but he builds his deck in a way to where he wants to make you like rage quit. That's the way I feel. Like, I've played against him enough, but like his circus thing that he did when the Widow combo was out and when he would play the Love at First Sight deck, I feel like Jeremy's a cool, laid back guy, right? You meet him, hey, cool. And then as soon as he sits down with one of those combo decks, he is hunting for your soul. That's the way it feels like playing against him sometimes.
Jeremy Chambers is the John Wick of Redemption.
Yeah, that's John Wick of Redemption. Okay, I'll take that. Now that we've talked about this deck a little bit, and obviously you've got articles, and I know I talk all the time about how much you write and give all the detail about each deck. There's information about this deck and the different variations that people can go and read about on Land of Redemption. So that's out there. But while I have you here, you maybe in the near future are going to release something. You got something up your sleeve?
Well, you know, the thing I did have up my sleeve was the Purple Heart deck, which is kind of, you know, it takes the Starstruck consistency engine, but does something different with it. Not all in. I don't have as many ways to get that top deck dominant to hand, but that deck is really fun, and I just released that last week. I think it's probably the culmination of this whole deck building process. I don't know if there's anything better out there for the engine, because yeah, being able to play out Nazareth on your opponent's turn is really strong when you're going second, and then still being able to just cruise in with John the Fisherman, because the deck has a bunch of enhancements that back him up. And so that's pretty fun. Outside of that, I actually don't have anything brand new. I'm going to revise my Nativity version of Starstruck. I've been working on that, the one I used at Nationals, but yeah, I don't have any brand new ideas. We'll see what happens, but I've kind of put all my cards on the table at this point. And I was working on that deck, Purple Heart, from like mid-December up through last week, and refining it, running it a bunch of tournaments, and yeah, I like it. I think it's probably my second best deck I built other than Soul Surfer in the past several years. It's really fun.
I didn't actually. I guess we'll break down the fourth wall a little bit. We talked a little bit, me and Jake, on the main part of the podcast about the new meta forecast or whatever that we've done, that you're part of the group picking the 12 deck, and Purple Heart was on there, and I didn't feel that I had enough of an idea to offer a vote on it, so I didn't vote on it. But I'm definitely interested in seeing that one, loading it up in Lackey and tinkering around with it. But with that deck build, with the Soul Surfer, with the success that you've had, again, I'll keep saying it. I don't think Soul Surfer is nearly as good of a deck when anyone else plays it. So I think that's a feather in your cap as a pilot. But you've got the Oregon State tournament coming up, and that's actually going to be before the Kentucky State tournament. So it's going to be the first big state tournament. Have you settled on which deck that you're going to play?
It'll be between Soul Surfer and Purple Heart for sure. I haven't decided which one I'm going to go with yet. Part of that is I'm not going to check in multiple decks in Nationals this year. I did that last year, and that was a mistake because I was indecisive. And so I'm wanting to kind of test what I think is my best deck out. And so I'm going to use Purple Heart in the upcoming Lackey Grand Prix and see how that goes. And if it does good, then I'll probably run it at State. But if it does bad, I'll go with Soul Surfer and run that. So it's up in the air. It's going to be one of those two. And I think those are the two best things I have. So we'll see.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. I think you do a lot for the game as far as building and sharing these deck lists. So I know that I appreciate it as a player, and I think it helps round out the meta, having someone constantly tinkering with some of these style of decks, pushing the envelope a little bit. So glad we were able to get you on and feature, some of your deck builds. And again, if you're hearing about the deck for the first time, go and read the articles. They're on Land of Redemption, and you can go and check them out. And even see, potential changes that have happened over time. But is there anything you want to share with the community before we cut you loose here?
I guess one thing would be, just you mentioned pushing the envelope a bit, and that's something I'd like to see from the community is like more creative deck building. I think we tend to get into a rut maybe with deck building where we have certain deck builds that are and approaches to deck building that are really powerful, like battle winning dominance. A lot of the builds always run that, but not every deck has to do that. I think that sometimes you can win without battle winning dominance and build an offense that can win without that, and then use the dom slots in a different way. So just trying to find different ways to build decks that can win. Some guys that are good at that, like he's not been real active lately, but Jared, he's really good at that, and him and I both like that way of going about deck building, trying to find a little different way to build that's a strong strategy but outside the box, even using cards like Purple Heart uses Guardian of Your Souls, and I think it's a build that actually it works. And I bet if Jared were around, he'd be building decks with Guardian of Your Souls too, trying to find just different ways to win. And it may not be the best, but it's just good to do that and find and explore new avenues. So just kind of, I guess, a challenge to the community. We need more of that, because I think we'll find, things that work through that process that are really cool.
Yep, absolutely. And if not, that they're really good, maybe you'll find something that's fun to play, because sometimes it's nice to just sit down with the game and enjoy playing the game, even if it's not a deck that's going to have a high win rate. Sometimes it's just nice to pull off the little, tinkering combo with the deck, even if it doesn't lead to wins consistently. You've been challenged, community. Get out there, build some creative decks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Threshing Floor Podcast. Help us grow our community by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're at it, be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss the next episode. And we'll talk to you next time on the Threshing Floor Podcast.